Hey guys, I want to talk about James chapter 2 today. In particular, this is a pretty popular passage talking about faith and works, but I wanted to talk about it from the perspective of some real application. And we're going to look at verses 14 to 21 thereabouts. So he says, "What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Depart in peace, be warmed and filled,' but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit?" And what he's talking about here is he gives an example of maybe you have so much food in your house and it's enough for you and your family, but a brother comes over and he says, "Hey, we're out here starving." And you're like, "Okay, well, I'll pray for you," and you kind of send him on his way. What he's saying here is that is actually not faith. That's not loving. That's not anything. That's just kind of false piety. And you just kind of send your brother on his way. That's not legit. So he says in verse 17, "Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works.'" So in this passage right here, in this verse rather, in verse 18, he draws the distinction that one person is going to say, "Well, I have faith," and the other person is going to say, "Well, I have works." And James is saying, no, it's not either of those. It's faith produces works. You see, works by themselves produce self-righteousness, and faith without works is a dead belief. It's just dead. It's useless. That's the distinction that he's trying to make there with a starving brother that comes over and you do nothing. You're just like, "Oh, I'll pray for you and stuff." How does that fill him? How does that feed him and his family? How does that help in any way? And he's basically saying it doesn't. So he goes on here to talk about that faith works is a product of faith. That if you have faith, if you have so much food in the house and a brother comes over who is starving and you take what you have and you split it with him, that is faith. It's faith that God will provide for your next meal. It's faith that God will provide for you and your family. It's faith because it's taking what the fact that God provides, and it's putting it into action, putting your trust in Him and loving your brother. And he goes on in verse 19, he says, "You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar?" And then he goes on to basically draw several distinctions. One of the things that he talks about here is he talks about Abraham, he talks about Rahab, and he talks about how it wasn't enough simply that they intellectually believed, because that belief doesn't become faith, true saving faith, until you put it into action. And for some of us, that's finding a place to utilize our gifts. That's finding a place to serve. That's taking time. We only have so much time, but we have some time that we can give to others. We only have so much money, but we have money that we can give to others. It's, for some of us, it's doing. But for others of us, it's waiting on the Lord. Because faith that he's talking about, or works rather that he's talking about here, is faith put in action. And just like the Shekinah glory, the cloud that overshadowed the Israelites going through the wilderness, sometimes that cloud was moving, and when it was moving, the Israelites were told to continue moving forward. And when it stayed, they were expected to stay in that location and wait on the Lord. And sometimes for us, that cloud is moving, and we have this predisposition. We want to move all the time, and then all of a sudden the cloud stops, and it's like, yeah, I want to keep moving. But that's where faith comes in. All right, that's where the works here that James is talking about comes in, is because faith is, or works rather, that he's talking about here is faith in action, which means that when God tells us to wait on Him, it's just a matter of waiting on Him. All right, it's a matter of putting that into action. And I know that's difficult for some of us, especially if you're anything like me. You can't stand to sit still. You always have to be doing something. I feel like anytime I'm not doing anything, I'm at risk of being lazy and useless, and that's just not me. That's not who I want to be. But there are times when God is telling me to hold still, and that is actually more difficult for me than it is to work a 20-hour day trying to get something done, especially if it's something that I'm doing specifically for the ministry. So I wanted you guys to kind of get that perspective. It was something that God had kind of revealed to me in my devotions this morning. I wanted to share that with y'all. Sit down, pray about it, read through this passage, pray as you're reading through it, and ask God to kind of reveal, is this a period for you where you're waiting on Him and trusting in Him to do His work? Or is this a period for you where you need to be busy doing something for Him? And let His Holy Spirit just reveal that to you. So, anyway, I want to share that with you. God bless.